Hey everyone, this is Joe Filippone, and I am hanging out with Chris Gordon on Hellblazer.biz.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, listeners, wherever you may be in the world right now. This is Hellblazer Biz with your host, as always, me, Chris Gordon. Today, I bring to you another interview that I conducted before Christmas, but obviously, I apologise for the delay in getting it to you, but unfortunately, as I'm sure you can all understand, Christmas and New Year, well, gets in the way. So apologies to Joe as well for taking so long. Had to edit. There was issues with the sound because I got a new headset and a new mic, and apparently it seems to cut the sound out a little bit, so I do apologise. But here we go. Today, I bring to you a fantastic actor and a really interesting chat. We had a great chat and a lot of fun. So yes, no further ado, I bring to you Joe Filippone. Joe, hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you coming onto the show and reaching out.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. It's late over there for you, isn't it? It's what are you guys, like 8 hours ahead of us?
Yeah, it's but just after 8 p.m.
Oh wow!
At the moment, yeah, so it's not too bad. It kind of does make it difficult though, because when you guys are in LA and you've got such busy schedules, and you're saying, I can do 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. I was like, yeah, that's really cool. That's kind of middle of the night for me.
Yeah. No, I'm doing voice work for radio drama.
All right.
And the writers are in England, and so sometimes when we have Skype meetings about the show and stuff, it's kind of the same thing. It's I'm always asking them. I'm always like, okay, what time would that be here in LA and all that stuff. So I totally understand.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm kind of getting used to it now.
Yeah,
thankfully. I have messed it up a couple of times though with timing. Ended up being up till midnight myself. So, but that was the school. I think that was working with a publicist once. I think it was for Lucifer. But I had deadlines with it was Trisha Helfer, I think, and yeah, the only time that they could do it was like 11 o'clock p.m. my time start, and they were like, "Will you be able to do that?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" Yeah, so I will work my way around things.
Yeah,
excellent. So as you know, I've got questions for you here to try and find out a bit more about yourself and let you talk about yourself and let people hear more about Joe Filippone.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. So first question is, what made you decide to get into acting in the first place?
Gosh, I don't really have at least to me in my mind, an interesting story of I was really introverted, and then I did a school play and I fell in love with it, or I was in a pep rally and saw that all the guys and in the plays were getting all the girls or whatever. My kind of what made me fall in love with it is I was 3 years old and I was watching The Wizard of Oz with my parents, the one with Judy Garland and Margaret Hamilton. And when it was over, I turned to my parents and I said, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And The Wizard of Oz, ever since then, it's been my favorite movie. It holds a special place in my heart. It's I'm man enough to admit that, I cry when I watch it and all that. I'm fascinated by The Wizard of Oz. I've read all the books on it, seen all the documentaries. I've, every time it's on TV, I watch it. I've got all the special edition DVDs. So that was kind of, and I don't know what it was about that movie, but I don't remember this part, but my parents do, that when it was over, I asked my mom and dad if we could watch it again, and so my mom rewound it, because this was back in the 80s, in the days of VCRs, and we watched it again, and I just from that one viewing, I had the whole thing memorized, and so I was saying the lines and I was acting it out, and at one point, I was acting out all the characters, so I went and got a pair of my dad's boots and put them on, and they were too big, and I was acting out the farmhands, and then I got into my mom's drawer and took out one of her nightgowns, put it on, and I was acting like Dorothy's character and all that. But yeah, so ever since I was 3, I've always wanted to do this, and I've always been very creative. I've always had a big imagination. I was always making my stuffed animals talk, my little action figures talk, acting out stories with them, doing plays with them. And I always had like a lot of imaginary friends. You know, I was always creating people and you know, not, I don't know if daydreaming is the right word, but I was always like coming up with like these fun, like little characters and worlds and stuff. So then because of that, I also wanted to be a writer and got into writing stories and making up stories and all of that. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that my parents have always supported me wanting to go into acting and then going into acting. They never pushed me to go and get, you know, some kind of backup degree. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they never tried to dissuade me from doing it. You know, and my parents, from a very early age, they were taking me to the theater to see plays. They were taking me to movies. My mom, you know, made me watch all of the classic movies. I grew up with, you know, Greta Garbo, Ingrid Bergman, Cary Grant. She made me watch the classic TV. You know, I grew up with I Love Lucy and, you know, all of those. Because she wanted me to see what real actors were and, you know, what you could do and how great and iconic you could be. And, you know, my mom was always working, you know, 2 and 3 jobs to let me do a, you know, summer intensive at like a little community theater and learn how to act. And, you know, letting me take voiceover classes, having me take classes in stand-up comedy. When I went to college, I went to college, started college when I was 16. I started at a community college, and it was all the acting classes that I took. And then when I got through all of that, my mom was like, you know, take the directing class, take the playwriting class, take the stage makeup class, the, you know, stage manager class, learn how to do everything. No. And she wanted me to be fully rounded in this business. And my mom, you know, was always saying, you know, if you're going to do it, you know, put your whole heart and soul into it and you know, study and keep studying and get better. And, you know, my mom was always saying, you know, it's like, you know, you being an actor, it's like if you want to be a doctor, you're going to go back to school to learn the newest techniques, like, you know, because it's the show business, it's always changing.
Very true. No, that's absolutely fascinating. Lovely way to get into it as well. I mean, I was sitting there smiling away because a lot of what you said was reminiscent with things of my childhood too. With the imagination and playing, you know, sitting there. I mean, obviously not I loved the Wizard of Oz when I was little, but I was 10 years older than you in that respect. So by the time you were watching those with your VHSs in the 80s, I think my dad was indoctrinating me into James Bond and Blazing Saddles. So, but so I could actually. But I was the same.
I grew up with all of those too because my dad loves all those movies. Like, you know, I saw all the James Bond, I saw all the John Waynes. I grew up with the Blues Brothers. That was my dad's favorite movie.
It's an awesome film.
And that was on TV. We had to watch.
Oh yeah, no, it's brilliant. But you can't fault the Blues Brothers one bit.
No, you can't.
No, but yeah, I mean, I've got this knack which people get annoyed with in the fact that I can recite films, you know, point blank, and lovely to hear that because it does ring true about, you know, I think having a good imagination when you're a kid is so important. And it shapes who you can become.
My mom ever did to like. Not stifle is the right word, but the only thing she ever refused to do, and I remember even when I was little and like a teenager and stuff, we would have massive fights, is she wouldn't take me to LA.
Right.
And she refused to let me go out to LA until I, you know, had a childhood and, you know, I didn't move out here until I was like 21, you know.
Right.
I've been out here about 8 years. But yeah, me and her used to have massive fights because I wanted to go to LA and I wanted to act and my mother refused. She said, you know, you're not going to be one of those child actors. You're not going to be paying my bills. You're not going to be supporting me. She let me do community theater in Denver. And then when I got older, when I got into high school, I started doing independent films in Denver and the student films, just to know what it was like to be on a film set and all that. But school always came first with my mother. And if I didn't, keep my grades up, I couldn't do the plays. I couldn't, go and audition and do all of that. Because my mom wanted me to have that childhood. And it's, there is still like, at times I'm like, if I would have come out in the 90s, maybe it would have been easier. I would have been further ahead than I am. But then it's like, I think of all the things that I would have missed out on. And I'm like, my mom really did know best.
Exactly. I mean, you do see a lot of that. And I mean, you can see a lot of that now in child actors from our early years, from the 70s and 80s, who did go to LA straight out, and I bet you are thanking your mum a lot more now, because you can see how the effect it has when you're at such a young age to get into such the limelight of an industry there. I think it can damage you, and you lose your childhood. You immediately become an adult because you're a professional straight away from an early age, so you don't have that opportunity to sit with your action figures and play, or or just go outside with your imaginary friends and play around and just make up games. There isn't that option.
Because my mom likes movies and watches movies and stuff and watches TV shows. Like, she would see all of these child actors that would get screwed up.
Yeah.
That would die, at young ages. So I think that scared her, 'cause, I'm an only child, and it took my mom a long time to get pregnant with me.
Yeah.
And so, and my mom told me, years and years later, after I was 18, that she always had this horrible fear that something would happen to me, that she would lose me, that I would die. And I don't know if all parents feel that way, or all mothers maybe feel that way, but I think, because she wanted a kid so bad and it took her so long to have me, and I was the only one, that I think there was a little bit, not that overprotectiveness, but I think that little thing of she wanted to make that childhood special and make sure that I didn't lose out on anything. And I didn't. I have wonderful memories of growing up, and I had a great childhood. So, I can't fault her for anything at all.
No, that is fantastic, and it's great to hear. And I think she's probably had. Yeah, you're right. And mothers always have that protective way about their children, and always worry.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you see it. You're a parent, so I'm sure you worry about your son, or I'm sure that your wife, worries about your son, and
oh yes.
Yeah,
definitely. It's just maternal or paternal thing you have to, you get to do. It's just one of those things. It's natural.
Yeah.
Cool. So, growing up and obviously, going into that sort of career and looking at, do you have any role models who inspired you or inspire you in the acting world?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by a lot of the old time actors and actresses, and just the things that they did and how they, lived, and the way that they work, like the work ethic that they had. And I could probably just really anyone from that golden age, the Cary Grants, the Katharine Hepburns, the Mae Wests, they knew who they were, and they, for the most part, stuck with their guns, especially people like Katharine Hepburn and Mae West and Ava Gardner, who they wanted to do their own things, and they didn't want people to control them. And I think that that's something that a lot of people in our business, even back then, but I think especially now more so, they lose that. And a lot of actors, and I think a lot of young actors especially, they don't know who they are. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that's why they don't have the careers, or they have a little more soul, or they do, one big thing and then they fall off because they don't have a sense of themselves. And I'm a big Lucille Ball fan. Lucille Ball is a big idol to me, just because, she had so many struggles, and she didn't give up. I love Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
Her work ethic. I don't think anybody comes close